What would you do if you were shot in the face and left for dead? Imagine you're minding your own business when, for no reason that you could fathom, a stranger comes straight for you, raises a shotgun, aims it at your face, and pulls the trigger. If you survived, what would you do? With a show of hand, how many of you would want to seek revenge? I see some brave hearts. It is natural to want to fight back, and there is nothing shameful in having that instinct. But sometimes instinct does not serve us well in the long run. Living in a diverse society, there are bound to be conflicts: social, cultural, religious, personal, and professional. We're living in a time where the escalation of these conflicts means more innocent people are paying the price, all too often with their lives. Unfortunately, the increase in conflicts, misunderstanding, violence creates only more victims, more loss, more division, and ultimately solves nothing. I can speak to this from personal experience. I was one of these innocent victims. I became a survivor. Not satisfied though, I eventually began to thrive, utilizing the tools that this great country provides and choosing the path of mercy, compassion, and forgiveness, which ultimately brought me here today. After graduating as a pilot officer from Bangladesh Air Force Academy, I did not feel my destiny was there. When I got a chance to come to the United States for additional higher education, I took it. I left my family, my home, my fiance, my career to come to the United States to fulfill my educational pursuits, while also hoping to experience the American dream. But within a short time, my American dream turned into an American nightmare. Shortly after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, a white supremacist in Dallas was in a shooting rampage, killing Muslims. I was one of his victims. On September 21st, 10 days after the attacks, I was working in a friend's gas station when a man wearing a bandana, sunglasses, and a baseball cap, holding a sort of double-barreled shotgun, burst in. He pointed the gun directly at my face. Having been robbed before, I opened the cash register and offered him money. Instead of taking it, his gaze remained fixed. And then he asked, "Where are you from?" And before I could say anything more than, "Excuse me," he pulled the trigger from point-blank range. I felt it first. Like a million bees were stinging my face, and then I heard the explosion. I looked down and saw blood was pouring like an open faucet from the right side of my head. Frantically and instinctively, I placed both hands on my head, thinking I had to keep my brain from spilling out. I heard myself screaming. Then noticed the gunman is still standing there. And I thought if I did not appear to be dying, he would shoot me again. I fell to the floor. He finally left. I grabbed the phone, but I could not dial 911. I ran to the barbershop next door, and 3 men inside looked at me in horror, and assuming the gunman was right behind me, scrambled to escape out back. I screamed, grabbing one of them and begging him to call 911. As he did, I caught myself in the mirror. The image reflected back was gruesome, like something straight out of a horror movie. In an instant it takes to pull the trigger, I had become disfigured, was losing blood and strength rapidly, fighting to stay awake, fighting to stay alive. The EMTs arrived on scene, found me running around the parking lot, screaming, barefoot, shirtless. On my way to the hospital, I began losing consciousness. Images of my mother, my father, my other siblings, and my fiance appeared before my eyes, and then a graveyard. I promised God, if He let me live, I would do good things with my life. There was so much I had wanted to accomplish and contribute. 5 hours after I was shot, I finally lost consciousness and was put on life support. The next thing I remember, I was asking, where am I? Thinking I had died, I anxiously waited. And when I heard, "Good morning, Mr. Bhuiyan, you are in the hospital," it was one of the most beautiful moments of my life. My eyes were full of tears, not from the pain, but from the joy of still being alive. But the joy did not last long. Within few hours, the hospital, which was private and expensive, and I didn't have health insurance at that time, discharged me and expected I would arrange follow-up medical treatments at my own. The second part of my American nightmare just began. As a result of the shooting incident, I underwent several eye surgeries. Unfortunately, though, I ended up losing sight in one eye. The right side of my face and head was and remains peppered with more than 36 bullet fragments. I lost my home, my job, my sense of security, and my fiancée, but gained more than $60,000 in medical bills. I reached out to Red Cross, but they informed me I was only qualified for 1 week's worth of groceries. When my father heard what happened to me, he suffered a stroke. Thankfully, he survived. I was extremely fortunate. The gunman, Mark Stroman, killed 2 South Asian men during his 9/11 retaliation shooting spree. He claimed he was hunting Arabs, but not one of his 3 victims was Middle Eastern. After his arrest, he told news media he had done what most Americans wanted to do. They just didn't have the guts. He claimed he was the true American, a patriot. He blamed me and my kind for 9/11. And he said, America is no place for Muslims until I started a campaign to try to save his life. With the support of Amnesty International, Muslim Legal Fund of America, I ran a campaign to save the life of my attacker. Working with Reprieve, a London-based non-profit organization, I took my campaign to the European Union Parliament and German Parliament at the headquarters of Lundbeck, the lethal injection manufacturer in Denmark. We convinced them to write a letter to the governor of Texas not to use their product to kill human beings. After our visit, Lundbeck also announced that they would stop supplying this drug to the US prisons that carry out executions. In the meantime, Mark came to know a little bit about me and the diverse coalition I formed with the help of Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Christians, and atheists who rallied together to get him removed from death row. I was told he was stunned. He was touched by our efforts. This was not something he expected from a Muslim. In a statement, he said, "In a free world, I was free, but I was locked up in a prison inside myself because of the hate I carried in my heart. It is due to Rais's message of forgiveness. I'm more content now than I've ever been." He also wrote a long letter to me where he said, "My stepfather embedded some lessons that I should have never learned. I have unlearned some of them, and I'm still working on some of them. I don't know who your parents were, but it is obvious they're wonderful people to lead you to act this way." What happened as a result of the shooting, Mark was tried and convicted, and he was sentenced to death by lethal injection in 2002. When he heard about my campaign and the contribution from the Muslim community, he thanked the entire Muslim community, condemned his own acts of violence, and called me brother in a phone conversation. It moves me profoundly to think that the man who tried to kill me because of the ways in which I was different learned to see the ways in which we were the same enough to call me brother before he was executed. His last words We're called for an end to hatred, saying hate is going on everywhere. It has to stop. Hate causes a lifetime of pain. It seems to me that although retaliation is a natural response, it does not make you feel as good as you think it will. Any harm you inflict or hope to see inflicted against another human being winds up hurting you too. We are all cut from the same cloth. When one of us bleeds, we all bleed. When I was able to see Mark as a human like me, learn more about his life, and that he hurt too, I was able to forgive him. And that took any hint of bitterness away from my heart and allowed me to be whole again. He hated me when he didn't know me, but in the end said he loved me. Once you get to know the other, it is hard for you to hate them. Forgiveness and kindness had a transformative effect on Mark Stroman. Life challenges us every day. I have traveled to many cities and small towns across America that are going through challenges, meeting many people struggling to make ends meet, stressed, living in fear of the other, and looking for change. I understand their fear, their pain and suffering. The other is not the enemy. Ignorance and hate is the enemy. And unfortunately, it has created so much mistrust, fear, intolerance, and continues dividing us. If we commit and work together, we can overcome the challenges. We can overcome the issues that plaguing American families and destroying lives and communities. There is nothing that America cannot fix. Together, we can build a stronger, more prosperous and accepting world, and in turn, compassionate and empathetic human being. But how do we bring about this change? As Gandhi said, you must be the change you want to see in the world. I wanted this world to be more merciful, forgiving, and accepting. I had suffered a lot, lost a tremendous amount because of someone else's hatred. But the tragedy helped me to see the possibility of a world without hate, a world full of love, compassion, and empathy. I could not save the life of Mark Stroman, but perhaps I can help save future Mark Stroman. Through my nonprofit, World Without Hate, I dedicate my life working to prevent ignorance and violence, eradicating hatred by educating people about the transformational power of mercy and forgiveness, empowering people to connect with others unlike them, and to encourage everyone to take time from learn one another instead of the stereotypes and labels society has imposed. I believe we all want a better, just, and more forgiving world, but what are we prepared to do to get it? I believe it starts within each of us, taking a moment to check where your moral compass lies. Take a moment to soften your heart, make your tone a little bit friendlier. Take time to connect with others unlike you. Stand up against all manifestations of hate. Take a moment to forgive someone who hurt you in the past. Extend a helping hand, reaching out to your family, friends, neighbors who may be going through some challenges instead of ignoring them. Because by doing so, you could positively affect and even save innocent lives. Together, we must stand up against human suffering, even if we think we may not like the victims. The challenges Muslims, Jews, Mexicans, African Americans, women, the LGBTQ community, and all who are suffering right now may not affect your or your loved one's life today, but may indeed tomorrow. I would like to leave you with this. As Martin Niemöller, the German theologian, said, at first they came for the communist, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one to speak for me. Thank you.